Tech. I'm telling the people in the back to quiet down in case you hear them, but we had an explosion of tech come out last week with the Apple Pro Vision. What does that mean for education moving forward on the other side? Welcome everybody to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's David. That is Jupe, who you probably heard talking over as we came in. It's fine, you know. When we go main screen, Jupe, that means we're doing the code open, but it's okay. Omar is out somewhere doing secret agent things, but hopefully he'll be joining us soon. Today's episode is special and fun for me. I'm going to be very honest, and I'm going to take the heat off of my team in this. I am a tech junkie. I love it. I am a first responder type of person. I have early adopter, especially in Apple things. And Apple just had Apple Vision Pro come out, and it is a Gen 1. Here, let me switch this so you guys can see. It's a Gen 1 device. I mean, but the thing is just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous piece of technology. And it is incredibly immersive. I put this thing on, and my expectations as a first gen product we're like, oh, I'm looking to see if it can do half of what it said, but I'm not really expecting a lot. I got an Oculus that's Meta or Facebook's version. I've played with some other stuff. You know, it's kind of gimmicky. It's just kind of toyish. I appreciate the Oculus, but when I put this thing on and really got into it, man, I was shocked. I was so shocked by just the fidelity of it, how good it was, 8K in each eye or whatever the case is. It was clearer than my television. And then I went outside and I was watching a movie, and I made the screen larger than my house. And I was just sold. It was ridiculous. So much so that I had to send a text message to this group of people with video of me demonstrating just the technology that was there. And it got me thinking, if we could just think about education with just dreams, our wildest dreams as far as technology is concerned, where would we land? But before we get into that, because Jubilee has gotten on all three of the men in this place, and she enjoys check-ins, I guess. We're gonna do a check-in. Let me go first. My check-in, I'm good, I'm breathing. Incredible check-in. Awesome. Jubilee, we will go to you next, and you are on deck.
Hi, I'm Jubilee, and I love checking in because home is where the heart is, so it's important to connect.
Kind of platitudes. You sound like the platitudes that they sell at like the home store. Live, laugh, love.
It's me. I'm that lady. I am the lady in the rug section.
Like people who need inspiration to decorate get slogans just like that. Mm-hmm.
Pick me. I'm doing great. It's been a long day. I have been back in this classroom, so I've got a lot of stuff to say about this topic and what could be done. But yeah, all is well in my world. I'm happy, and I'm glad to connect with you guys once again. Let's have a great show.
That's what's up. Omar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Doc a bit here, man. Like, it was a crazy day. I'm good. Weather nuts in Texas. Things are nuts in Texas. Governor Abbott fighting for those vouchers, but I think the fight is done and over. He did not get what he wanted to get, and he called like 1,000 special sessions. And I got to figure out whether or not those special sessions are done or not. Last I heard, they were still in session, and then I heard it got struck down, but I didn't verify that with the Texas Tribune. So more on that to come. But I want you to be you and to be kind. That I think is the most important thing that we could accomplish here today.
Oh my God! I should
For our
have
listeners, Jubilee's holding a mug
David.
that says "Be you, be kind."
David, I should have went to you before those two, but before I go to you, David, I'm just going to get to it. I watched the new show, David and team, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Donald Glover and has reimagined it into a series. And as I was watching this show, which was actually really good, I said, "Oh, this must be what Omar does." Like Omar, like the way Omar is cagey, and we don't really know where he is most of the time. And that's how this couple was. Like they would just be in a different part of the world in Italy, just doing espionage stuff. But that is what I think Omar does in real life. I think he is a Smith, a Mr. Smith. But that's why his check-in was so weird. But I'm gonna go to David without letting Omar even respond to that. How you been, David?
Been good. We've got we have 2 high school events this week, visiting potential high schools for next year. So we're excited about that. And we had a tornado warning earlier today. So I know Charles, you're used to that. Jubilee, not sure about you. Omar, I don't know what happens in El Paso, but yeah, we had a legitimate tornado warning. I don't know if one touched down, but the weather's been crazy, and the phone went off. We had 2 warnings, and they're like, get to the lowest part of your house. And I'm like, underneath the house? We don't have a.
Yeah, they don't do basements on the West Coast.
No. So we just got down. We like getting down, but yeah, that's it for the check-in.
Man, well, that's that. I'm glad y'all are safe, and I'm glad y'all are okay. We got some warnings out here in the suburbs of Chicago, but Kentucky, where I live with my grandmother, been through a lot of tornadoes. So
yeah,
those drills will scare the hell out of you if you're not used to them. But I was used to them. But yeah, man, I'm glad y'all are okay. And now listen, again, I will apologize for this show up front, because my excitement, I was kind of I love technology, and again, first gen stuff. Beta stuff, I'm used to it being underwhelming. I'm used to having to take notes on the bugs and send in reports and things like that. And this will have that too, surely. I mean, it's a first gen product, but what I saw, I mean, it was the Jetsons. It was Back to the Future. It was Ready Player One. I feel like they took a lot of inspiration from Ready Player One, even if you look at the eyepiece and you look at the things it can do. And this is just the beginning. This is before the world has gotten their hands on it, before all these developers, these smart, ambitious people, and it instantly changes your thinking, it instantly expands on what you can do. And I saw this thing where, what's his name that does Avatar, biggest of all time, James Cameron, biggest movie maker.
James Cameron.
Yeah, James Cameron said, I haven't made all the avatars because the technology isn't here. I went back and looked at the first Avatar that he made a decade ago. And it was made for this device. I mean, I was in the air. I was with the Na'vi. It was incredible. But it got me thinking with you all. And I will try not to overtalk this. My excitement. I am genuinely excited. But I wanted to just ask you if you could just expand your thinking. How could education be impacted by just new technologies? It could be this device specifically, but what is something futuristic, something innovative, something truly just game changing that you all can think about? And I'll referee a little bit. I'll go to you first, David, and then Jube, you'll be on deck.
Ooh. Yeah, you mean in general or in terms of education?
I would say take it where you want to take it. I was thinking kind of education, but I do want you to go wherever you feel the most excited about.
Yeah. Okay. So first off, for people that are watching and for Omar and Jubilee, if you haven't been around Charles long enough, you know that every time Apple has one of these special release events, his enthusiasm meter goes off the charts. So we are experiencing that right now, right? That's what's happening. I'm also a big fan of Apple products. I do not have, Charles, you're way ahead here, literally and figuratively. You've got you have the device, you have the future in your hands. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I think the one big thing for me, and we can talk through this, is let's see if I can get this right. I think it's timely because we are emerging from this global pandemic, right? Where most of us were so used to like being in a certain place for work, to conduct business, even to conduct, pleasure, or all of these things, right? And now coming out of the pandemic, I mean, there are some things that you just have to do like in person. But many people have chosen to remain quote unquote remote. And so I think one of the big opportunities here is, as people remain remote, or you have people living in like remote parts of the world, right? These new technologies have the potential to continue to bring people together, regardless of where we are geographically, right? So my big thing is, is there a world where this technology can we know that it can break down the geographical barriers, but is there a way for us to come together, beyond just like geography, but like, learning about other cultures, learning about people's different backgrounds, coming across different, political backgrounds, all of those things, right? I mean, I think that's my one big takeaway. I have some things to say specifically about education, but we'll get there.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
bringing people together.
Jewel.
Oh boy. The two words, like plan forward. I think every time now, I'm not like a big tech person. You see, I'm still trying to get my heart thingy working or what have you. That's
I'm kind of glad
advanced.
the gestures ain't working for you no more. It's kind of good. I love that it's working for David and not for you.
Wow.
You and Omar were children when you got this access. Like,
wow. So basically, right, it's okay for some to have access to new technology, but not all, right? Because look
Exactly.
at this caste system he's creating. Look at this.
Yeah.
Anyway, every time something like this is released, it's a reminder of the fact that we had an opportunity to plan forward as educators, as a nation, and we just didn't. It's like a missed opportunity, because these people that created this went to somebody's school somewhere, right? So those are the words I'm thinking around, just like, and that's the question, like, how do we do a better job of planning forward, right? This was not just an idea that somebody thought of last weekend. It's been in the development phase for, I think, quite some time, most likely. But yet, in our classrooms, we got books from 1970, like people that are 60 years old, like their textbooks from when they were in first grade. It's weird, so I just think it's I've got more to say later, but that's it. How do we do a better job of planning forward, knowing that we have information on what is to come?
I got you. Omar.
I mean, do we though? Like, here's the real question. Like, do we? And I got questions about this device, right? Because some of these things confuse me a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said like you saw a movie the size of your house. So help me understand, because you've got goggles on, right?
Yeah.
So when you say you can project a movie the size of your house, does that mean that you're sitting outside and within the goggles, you have this visual perspective of a screen that size kind of broadcast out, or how does it work?
Yes, that's exactly what. So it is. Think about like, it's not AR, because AR is like the real world. It's technically VR because your eyes are blocked, right? I can see the world because of all these cameras on the front. So it looks like I'm just looking at the world in front of me. When I put them on just now, I can see you all. Right above me, I was watching a YouTube
video. But you
video.
Can see us through the lens or through the cameras? That's confusing.
So you can't, there's a ton of cameras. There's a ton of technology in here, but there are so many high fidelity cameras that make it feel like you're looking straight through like some glasses, but it's actually cameras. And then there's cameras inside that's tracking my own eyes and my face. So if I got on, I could use whatever, right? The technology is top notch. So I'm
So
out
they ain't
looking.
sunglasses where you can see through them and you're kind of seeing the real
Sunglasses
world.
will absolutely come. They will absolutely when it,
No, but I'm saying these are cameras. So you put them on,
yeah,
and the world that you're seeing is not through your eyes; it's through the cameras.
it's through cameras that kind of mimic your eyes.
Oh.
So even when you're not looking at something, it gets a little like if I'm looking over here at David, you'd be a little blurry because that's just how the eyes work. So and that's how they keep such a high fidelity, right? Like it's so much technology in there. I mean, there's a whole technological piece we can get to, which I don't know half of what I'll be talking about, but just from the experience of it, I'm looking at my house. I go push a button. I control everything with my eyes and my finger. So I look at the thing, I tap my finger wherever, because there's cameras at the bottom of this thing as well, right? So I can have my hand in my lap, like, or just chilling, look, tap, movie comes up. I can expand the movie very, very large. There's immersive environments. If I want, I can watch it at Mount Hood or whatever the place was, or in Hawaii on top of that mountain. You can do it in daytime or nighttime. I went into Disney. Disney, you can sit in the Disney theater. And you can, like, if I look this way, I'll see my room. If I turn the knob at the top, full immersion, I'm seeing other rows of chairs. I look back, it's just the full theater. It is ridiculous. I watched, the HBO app has the Game of Thrones room. Disney has Avengers Tower. Disney, the scary, the little Monsters U place or whatnot. Tatooine, right? Like I've watched the movie in Tatooine with the two sons, dog. Like we're getting into Star Wars like nerd territory, but Omar's following me. Like, but I think
I'm with you.
It was just ridiculous. It was crazy, man. I can't fully explain it. Y'all gotta take this over because somebody's knocking at my door. But keep going. I mean, I'm crazy excited, but this the hood, and I need to answer this door. I'll be back.
Yeah, all right. So this helps clarify, I think, my misconceptions about like whether you could see through it or how big the screen was. So what I'm getting at is that like this is a complete virtual reality, if you will.
Right.
So those cameras can do anything that they want, and they can create anything that they want. And ultimately, like if that camera wants to make David look like David or look like the Jolly Green Giant, like it can happen, right? I think what I was saying to Jubilee's comment about like planning forward, we know these things are coming. Like people are so secretive about tech that like, yeah, dude, when I read Ready Player One, and it's one of my favorite books. So if folks haven't read Ready Player One, read it. It's absolutely outstanding.
I was going to ask
really
what you're referring to,
justice.
but now I see that it's a book. Yeah, I got to check it out.
Yeah, and it's a great book. It's one of my, like I said, one of my favorite books. I've read it several times now because I'm nerdy, and it's filled to the brim with like 80s pop references, and I love that. I will say the movie did a better job of creating a much more thorough character for Samantha, because the book kind of just made her into some like teen bop fantasy for a dude, which not great. But aside from that, like narrative situation, the book really got into the fact that in the future, every kid lives in this oasis. Everyone lives in the oasis, which is this virtual world, right? You go to school in the oasis, you live in virtual reality. And the book does such a great job of basically dealing and grappling with which one's better, like this virtual world or the real world. And people would be like, well, the real world is better. And it's like, well, like, what are the circumstances people are dealing with in the real world? So the protagonist, Wade Wantz, was living in extreme poverty in what were called the stacks, meaning not just trailer homes, but the property values have skyrocketed and it's a dystopian future. So they had to stack trailer upon trailer upon trailer upon trailer because of lack of space. Like, that's a tough situation. So people living in the oasis makes some sense. I want to get into the nerdiness of this all, but to kind of go back to being like, how do we plan for such things? Yes, I could read Ready Player One and envision a world where my kids and my students and our students have access to this kind of technology. And I want to expand way more on this because, dude, I imagine them like visiting the Louvre in this world, which they can, fully immersive. in the Louvre, being around what that museum looks like and hopefully kind of feels like, or seeing the Sistine Chapel, not on a computer screen, but actually looking up and then being able to zoom in and seeing, you know, the detail of that art, visiting Florence, walking through the Great Wall of China. Like, it's unbelievable what could be done. And again, I'll get more into this, but two things. One, I think that tech companies do a very good job of concealing what is going to come because they don't want other tech companies to take what they've done. So like, David, you were working with like the Google VR stuff, and I got to tell you, like, Google's probably scrambling because this makes that Google VR stuff look like the Flintstones, right? In terms of just the expansiveness of the tech.
That was also 10 years ago. So
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And like, you know, what's Google going to do? Or is Google thinking more of like Apple? You can have the hardware, we're going to have the software. We're going to invent the virtual world where you're going to go to school. We're going to invent the virtual world where, you know, we were talking about it in the chat, and Doc was mentioning, like, imagine sitting in a room and hearing Malcolm X's speech. And I'm like, bro, imagine the AI of not just sitting in that room, listening to Malcolm, imagine talking to him. Imagine sipping a cup of coffee and talking to Malcolm X, Malcolm Little, about like his transition and asking him questions and being like, yo, man, like, what happened between you and Martin? And hearing that explanation directly from him, it's unbelievable. So there's a lot more to expand about the possibilities, which I will. But I think that tech companies do a good job of hiding this stuff so that we don't know, because they don't want to lose that proprietary tech. But I will say this, like, I've been on one hell of like an ethereal bent lately, down the rabbit hole of the future and humans. And there's this really excellent book that coincides with a book Dan Brown wrote. So there's a book called Sapiens that I'm sure everyone's heard of. Same author wrote a book called Homo Deus, which is badass. So really quick, Sapiens was this book, Jubilee, basically saying, why do we do the things that we do? So it's an exploration of the last million years of humans, and basically saying we are the product of not just evolution, but millions of years of encoded DNA. This is why we have the senses that we have now. This is why humans behave in the way we do. We think that we're all making our own decisions, but a lot of the things that we do has been predicated on millions of years of past experience from humans and DNA. It also explains why, and this will get later into the show, because this is kind of the conspiracy kind of darker part of this all, is why did sapiens overcome and essentially eradicate Neanderthals? Neanderthals were not a lesser life form, not in any way, shape, or form. They weren't less evolved or dumber, not in any way, shape. In fact, there's a lot of studies that demonstrate their brains and brain capacities were even better than sapiens. It was our ability to communicate that wound up making us the dominant species. His next book, Homo Deus, is basically saying, here's the future. Immortality. We're going to be able to create all these organs and create immortality. Understand God, which may or may not be religious or technological. But this shit is the kind of thing that he is talking about in the evolution of humans, in the synchronization of human and technology into one. And Dan Brown wrote a whole book about it, I think, called Origins, that basically discussed the fact that humans as a species may go the way of the Neanderthal. And those of us who choose to sync with technology will become a new species, because essentially it is a new species. And that species of syncing with technology will essentially kind of bring about what people may think is revelations, the eradication of sapiens as we know it. Look, this is getting deep.
Are you running an ad for Neuralink?
Yeah, exactly. And here,
it sounds like I'm selling stuff.
And some new, I think some news came out about Neuralink this week. I think that they successfully did the first implant or something. I mean, listen, there's a lot of things to be terrified about with this stuff. There's gonna be a lot of things. I mean, just like with the cell phone, right? Like, you know, and I love Omar. God bless him. I mean, he took us on an off ramp. We in like Jupiter now. Like, you know what I'm saying?
We are, man. We
but
Jupiter, man.
I love it. I love it. You just made a conspiracy theorist dreams just come true. But I will just say, just to actually, I don't want to abandon where you were, but just some of the thoughts as far as education is concerned. Like,
right,
we are a place where we are talking about where we don't trust public education. We don't trust the lessons that we're getting. I mean, really, with this technology, the black delegation, the brown delegation, whomever, like whatever you believe in, like they could get 10 of their best thinkers. They could get 15 of their best folks and build out essentially, like you could have 20 people educate the nation, like where you go in and you're like in this stuff and it's immersive. Like if I want to know about the Ming Dynasty, right? Like this could put me in those places. Something that I think I mentioned this when I lived in Kentucky with my grandmother. Kentucky is very proud that they were the last state to enter the Civil War. And it was because Kentucky is on that border, right? So they had to choose if they were going to be the North or if they were going to be the South. And they at the last hour, they became the North. So as a kid, we would have these history lessons where they took us to these battlefields. Think about going to one of those battlefields, looking at a QR code in whatever goggles you got, and like you are instantly here. You're hearing from the general from the South and the general from the North. Like you're seeing it. It's smoky. I mean, when you go into immersive mode, everything disappears. It all disappears. Like it's crazy. So I just think that whether it's this technology or in general, we are soon are going to have even more tools. I think we got the tools now with phones, but we are going to have even more tools to where the state's education that you don't agree with or that you do, that's no longer going to be a big enough excuse as to why we're not educating our kids better, because we are really going to have the tools to be able to go do that on our own. Like we truly are. I mean, just like if you're a Mexican American and you're living in the southwestern part of the country, like imagine being able to take your kid who has just only been in this Americanized, reality, probably has lost a lot of touch. Maybe you as a parent has lost some touch, but if you could go to the Alamo, like, you know what I'm saying? And like really experience that or put your kid in that environment. I just think that it's going to be so many creative people that's going to think of education in ways we've never seen. I mean, you're going to be able to go inside of a cell. You're going to be able to go inside of an atom. And really look at what an atom is doing. Go ahead, David.
I want to go back to what Jubilee had made a comment earlier on your opening, Jubilee, about this technology or any other technology that's come before, and what has historically happened is that these things are developed in spaces where you don't see a lot of people of color, right? You see the launch of this new Apple product, and as cool as it is, it takes me back to like the old days of Microsoft when Bill Gates was dancing like a fool on the stage, right? With all of his buddies, and none of them could dance, and they're like bouncing around like, oh my God, this is great. This is what it feels like. And there's a bunch of conferences that have been happening over the last several weeks related to technology, all of these like VR technology, education roundtables, and I'm like, can you at least hire a black person or a brown person to sit at the table, right? And I'm like, they don't see it, right? So my point is, and I think this is what Jubilee was trying to say, is like these technologies are powerful, but if they are created through a lens of whiteness, right, then they are just going to reinforce that same thing that we continue to say that we are fighting against on this show, right? So the technology is the technology. Some of this technology, I think it can be used for like immersive learning. You can do virtual field trips. You can do like kind of embedded VR, like skills kind of training that you can't do, that maybe is not accessible in the real world. There's a whole like language component to it. So there's actually a lot of power in it. But going back to your earlier example, Charles, and then I'm going to pass it off to Jubilee, is like if I've done this like 10 years ago. Can you pull up this that first Twitter link there, Charles,
Yep.
in the private chat. So this is when I was head of school about 10 years ago at a TK8 public Montessori school. We partnered, we brought in Google to do that, to try out and trial their, at that time was called Google Cardboard. It was basically an Android phone that you would flip sideways and put into a cardboard box, right? And it was all programmed through their Google Expedition software, which could be run off of an iPad. And you can get kids into a room, and these kids are literally in the Great Barrier Reef, right? And you have a teacher that is on the iPad, and they can point to certain things in the image that the kids are seeing, and kind of direct their attention. And there was pop-ups, and it was pretty incredible, right? So this technology has been out there for a while, but my point here is, like, if this technology, and when it becomes accessible for children, for brown children, and for African American Black children, is the algorithm going to direct them to the Louvre or Big Ben or the Eiffel Tower versus the plains of Africa or Namibia or the pyramids of Teotihuacan, right? And so that's where my question comes into play. Is like the hardware is the hardware, the software is the software. The power is in the algorithm. Like, where is this technology going to direct people to, going to direct children to? And I think when you don't have, people of color at the table, that's where the risk is. So I want to pass it off to Jubilee, because I think she's been thinking about this for a minute.
Yeah, and I got a thought after Jubilee goes around what you just said too.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
So my point earlier around the whole plan forward thing is, like, I feel like things like this come out and they're wonderful, they're incredible, and can be super helpful. But it's like people are planning for the future without really keeping those who are going to be running the future or in charge of the future in mind. And to your point, David, like, who is at the table? So yeah, it might be done in secrecy, right? But let's think about some other simple things. Like, how many elementary schools have you been through that have automatic doors, working water fountains all throughout the building, right? Like, upgraded electrical outlets. How long has that technology been out?
But wait, you could be in a dilapidated school facility with this Apple technology, and it could look like you are in a 21st century learning facility.
Yes, you could, but that might be the
closest still cold.
To get to it, because they're not going to invest in actually upgrading the freaking building, even though that technology's been out for 30, 50 years. But you can go somewhere in corporate America, and you can walk in, there's going to be air conditioned all throughout and all these things. So it's just like, it's that piece right there. Like, I think without people at the table, without that advocacy from Black and brown people at the table, as well as those who advocate for education to be connected to, right, or spoken about or included in the planning process, I think it's still going to create the have and the have-nots, right? Like, over time. And those that are able to access it, afford it, and believe in it, and all the things that it can do, will be the ones that get it, and those that won't.
I want to jump in though. Well, go ahead. I want you to finish. I know tech people are screaming at the screen right now. Like, I know that they are.
This is my point. They could scream all they want to scream. What I'm saying is, I don't have any evidence, right, based on the track record, that this kind of stuff is inclusive, right? Like, I don't have any evidence that this is not just for profit. I based on what you have shared, I think that I agree with you. Like, I've been to the Louvre, I've been to it's lovely. Like, to have that immersive experience is excellent. But I'm talking about in the planning stages, or even after it's released, how fast do you think it's actually going to get to the classroom of a little Black boy from East New York, Brooklyn?
Well, I think it can happen really quickly in the same way that phones have become ubiquitous. I think wait, hold on a second. Because this is where I wanted to say this when David was speaking. Apple is not the only people that's going to be building this. Think of it as StreamYard. We're on StreamYard. They built the platform. now they release it to the world. So I go to Afrotech. I used to go to Afrotech every year until the last few years, right? Like there's a ton of Black engineers. There's a ton of Black people and brown people that are engineers. Like the same way that I can get Swift. Swift is an application to build Apple apps and all that stuff in. Like people, there are individual people that will be able to build these things. Like we don't, like whether somebody works at Apple, at this point, the technology is going to be out there. Google has been doing this, Meta's been doing this. So this first product is to get into the hands of developers. It's to get into the hands of the people. Apple's always going to do what Apple's going to do. They're going to have some polish. They're going to do certain things. They're going to put out guidelines. But then it's up to the community, to people. And as somebody who's had a developer account, it's up to people like me. I'm not really a developer, but I have the account, like to build those things and run it through to kind of make that happen. So the same way you have certain applications built by Black designers now on iPhone or on Android, that is the piece. What I'm trying to have us do is just think about what it potentially can get to, right? And like we're talking to, like we worked in Oakland schools. We worked in some very dilapidated schools, and those schools had Chromebooks. Like at some point, there maybe in 10 years, right? Like this is, first off, right now, nobody really has this stuff. They just released it last Friday. Like they want to get this V1 product out there, but in about 3 or 4 years, when people have had it, are developing it, are pushing the technology, I agree, tech companies should absolutely hire more Black people, more brown people, whatever the case is. But it's not Apple that's going to say, we don't hire Black people, or Google, we're not doing da-da-da-da-da. The same way we took StreamYard and we built the Black brownish show that we wanted to build, that we did that as like that kind of the community. I'm not disagreeing with what can happen. Wait, I'm not disagreeing with what can happen, but I just wanted to make sure for the purpose of the conversation, we didn't conflate, like, because I think people that don't know tech would be like, well, unless Apple does X, Y, and Z, Black and brown people are going to be left out. And that's just not necessarily the case.
I'm not saying that at all. What I am talking about is who's at the table to help this kind of stuff make it to Johnny in the hood or whoever, and that's what I'm saying. Things are continuing.
I'm at the table to help that happen.
Well, that's great.
People, yeah.
Yes, we need more like that, because what I'm saying is, if you're from where I'm from, and possibly we're all from, right? You're the last to experience whatever's new. By the time you get it, it's 10 years old. We experienced the pandemic, and schools took almost a year and change, right, and had to have special donations to get Chromebooks. How long have laptops been out? So that's all I'm saying, right? Like, it's not even necessarily about only Black and brown engineers and all of that. It's about who is advocating for the needs of the children, parallel to this stuff being developed, knowing that this is where the future is going, and we need this to be represented in our classrooms across America. Yeah. My last point is this: teacher education. Right, like I am supervising some interns. Right, they're all in their senior year, and I had a chance to review what they're being like tested on or what have you for their teacher certifications. None of this stuff is in there. No sort of preparation for technology and how it could be used in the future is a part of teacher preparation. So I'm saying basically all I'm trying to do is highlight the gap. That's all I'm doing.
But the technology ain't even a week old yet, is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this.
Well, I think what she's saying is probably not even like Google Classroom, right?
I get it. I get it, right? But like when you think about a Khan Academy is free. Anybody with a phone can go on to Khan Academy. Now, whether you use it or not is up to you. Like, we have cell phones in our pocket. The vast majority of the United States has access to now cell phones. Developing third world countries, many of those places are utilizing phones as their main computer, right? Like technology, there are still some places that don't have technology. Let me be very clear. Here in the United States though, right? Like people got access to that tech. Now, if you choose to go on Snapchat versus if you choose to watch the documentary, that's kind of on you. But what I'm saying is, I don't deny there's going to be racism and all this stuff all the time, right? Like, and if you're Apple, you're not like it's my job as Apple to make sure that education is here or Black education is this, that, and the third.
Should. I think
no, you should. Like, if my job is I'm building the tech. Like, if I build the technology and it's out there and it's democratized, like their job was to do what they just did. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, put it out there. Like, they're gonna be listen, I'm from the Bay. Kimberly Bryant started Black Girls Code. Like, there's more coding things in schools and stuff than I had ever seen, or like kids are learning how to code and build stuff at 7 and 8 years old. Like, this is a different crop of student that's gonna come up in this world with that stuff like mattering. Like, who remembers MySpace? And when Black kids got MySpace and cracked MySpace and started putting music in it and start like, this thing is going to take on a life of itself. What I wanted us to do, but I think we landed in a good place still, was to think about just the possibilities. Like the negative stuff is going to be there. Like the all that stuff, I feel you. I don't disagree with nothing that Dave or Jubilee has just kind of said, right? But for a moment, just allow your mind for a moment to like envision what could like be. You know what I'm saying? Like, what if it was a girl that loved dresses and somebody built an app? Maybe Barbie builds an app where it's like you can design Barbie's clothes, and you got kids at 4 years old, like, you know what I'm saying, building that stuff out, and their mind is going to be expanded in a way. It's like when you meet a baby and you see a baby with an iPad, you're like, how is this baby that can't walk yet operating this device? Like, we're older, like we're going to have to catch up to this stuff, but when it's going to be people born into that world, and it's just going to be all they know. And I'm just saying that's going to be crazy.
I think, I mean, so imagining the possibilities, I would say you have this this thing where like technology is technology. It can be super advanced, but we are always going to be human beings with 26 chromosomes and, you know, the number of bones we have and our general lifespan until they can learn to extend our lives past 100 years.
Right.
But it is what it is. So I think with the technology, one of the, I think for me, one of the hopes is to actually be able to remove learning from a particular space, right? If this technology opens up the world to people, then, you know, what would learning look like if it didn't have to happen in a classroom of 25 or 30 children, right? That are stuck to a particular bell schedule, you know, in a school day that is essentially what it looked like 100 years ago, right? So is there the potential to really like liberate learning and personalize learning? And I won't say but I will say, and also recognizing the risk of, you know, what does that mean for like the socialization piece, which is incredibly important for young people, right? So it's you know, people like, we're all like stuck on our screens. My kid just got an iPhone and I'm like, put that damn thing away. And I'm like, well, I kind of prefer that than him sitting on the couch with a VR headset on, because like, I'm good, you know.
Right.
So like, you know, it's interesting because we're getting to that point, but I'm like, you know, you can have the best setup. You could be living in the metaverse or in this new, you know, environment that you're experiencing, Charles. But like, you know, if somebody comes to your door trying to hurt you, they're going to still hurt you, right? You could still be in your virtual world, right? But like the physical world is still the physical world. The human touch is still the human touch.
Absolutely.
So I'm just saying, like, how do we balance those two things without going too far down the road, you know, or becoming full-blown cyborgs, as Omar was advocating for earlier.
Look, good. I'll be honest with you about a couple of things. One, and for my boy Alonzo, I know that you're coming in late. So what we're talking about is Apple released, what is it called, Charles?
The Apple Vision Pro.
Apple Vision Pro, which is essentially like what Ready Player One had predicted in the Oasis. Essentially goggles that make, whether it be you can see the real world through cameras, or in a completely immersive reality where all you can see is apparently Tatooine, hanging out with Uncle Ben and shit. And we're talking about what are like the really cool implications of that. What are some educational implications for that? Jubilee brought up, you know, a pretty fair statement about how does this new technology incorporate the lens of Black and brown people, and David kind of backed that up in terms of like, are we only going to be visiting the Louvre and Florence, or are we going to have like the Mayan pyramids? And are we going to be able to talk with, you know, African kings and queens that have been kind of obliterated from the history books? And then it's, you know, Doc kind of brought up the fact that like, well, like we're the creators now. So why aren't we creating that kind of stuff ourselves? And that's the thing. Like, I really do think that a lot falls on what those creators are, because one thing I will say about the educational space is, dude, I've been waiting for 10 years for some of this damn ed tech to come through. Exactly. In terms of like, can I just get good data on my students? Can you tell me what grade level they're in? Can you give me data to demonstrate, okay, if my kiddo is, you know, in the 7th grade and they're reading at the 2nd grade level, that's good data to know, but can you then give me all the corresponding TEKS, you know, which is the knowledge and skill sets that they're missing from 2nd grade to 7th grade, so I can start filling them in, because that's useful information. That shit barely came out. And I've been talking about that shit 15 years ago. I brought that up 10 years ago, and someone's like, I don't know when we're going to have that. And I'm like, shit, we should have had that already, homeboy. Like, I think I'm a little worried about this technology is awesome. That's why I was asking you some questions, Doc, because part of me hasn't been able to see the tech. So I'm like, is this just a computer? And it's like, oh, cool. Like, instead of this computer that I'm holding right here, I just have a virtual computer, in which case, like, to me, like, cool, but that doesn't make shit worth of a lick. That's right. The difference between my phone and a computer, being like, well, one's portable, one's not, but this goggle is just a computer. I think when we start getting into the implications of content is really where this thing is going to start hitting in a very different way of immersive realities that can help kids understand things like physics because they're applying it.
Right.
And I'm going to build this roller coaster and I'm going to ride it. Right. Or
I'm going to play around in chemistry class with chemicals that would have been unsafe normally.
Or yes, dude. And I can combine.
I'm going to dissect a frog.
What's going to happen. Exactly. In history and English, or like, hell, dude, like having everyone speak to you in French. So the Google thing is translating English into French, and all I'm listening to is French, and I can answer back in English, but just the immersion of French or Italian is what makes you learn a language. It's why a lot of Americans don't have the dual language component that we wish we had, and why Europeans do, because they're listening to German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French all the time.
Right.
Imagine these goggles being able to do that for us, right? But I will get into the fact that a couple things. One, I think, Jubilee, I'm with you on the haves and have nots, and this is where I think about the educational space, because I think if you're like a middle class, upper middle class white kid, and these goggles become Ready Player One, it becomes Ludus, it becomes the school. Like, bro, like why schools better figure this shit out, because why go to school when you can learn all this shit in like 3 hours instead of 8? And then it's like, what? Then school has lost its complete meaning. And it's like, now school may just only be a social gathering for electives and or sports and clubs that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do in the virtual world that you may still be able to do in the virtual world, right? So that's one thing. I'm thinking about this 20, 30, 50 years down the road, being like, dude, am I gonna have a job? Like, are schools gonna even exist? And I think where I have a little bit of hesitation is for low-income communities, Jubilee, who may not be able to afford this technology. Are schools going to be the place where they do have access to this technology?
Right.
Are we then going to become the gateway? So then do schools for the middle and upper middle class almost dissolve because they're getting it through the Oasis, and then schools become a place for the low income because we're able to give them the food and the technology and everything else, which gives a lot of pause and a lot of thought. And then I'm with you on the content, because
that's deep.
People are people, and like, people will create content based upon their experiences. And if it's only rich white people creating the content, like, how are we creating the content for things like Johannesburg or, you know, the jail that Nelson Mandela was at, or more importantly, how about like Africa in the 1300s that I'd love to visit well before, you know, the trade started. Because, you know, shit, man, like I went to the African American History Museum and I was like, why isn't this shit taught? Like from 1400 and like, or, you know, essentially what this 1600s before the slave trade started, all this incredible immersive history, including the root of civilization. Like, yo, man, I'd like to see that shit, but someone's going to have to create it. See, the thing is that it's always the royal we. It's like, we could go back to the root of civilization and figure it out. I'm like, no, you're going to see the interpretation of the root of civilization written by someone who's coding it. So what information are they using? Or like, what would be really cool, which we were talking about on the chat, is like, you know, it's the dinner question. If you could invite 5 people to dinner, who would you invite? And like, you know, I think like Muhammad, Buddha, and Jesus are always on my list, and being like, so what actually happened? What I want to hear some truth. What actually happened? You know, oh, Moses, get your ass in here. Like, what about that burning bush, man? What's up with that shit? Even that conversation that I'm having with Jesus of Nazareth is going to be the interpretation of humans and AI. This is where I'm going to get funky with you, David. I actually think that the quote cyborg situation is an inevitability. And I actually think that is,
I think we're kind of there now.
Quote apocalypse. It's either
I don't have any hardware in me
on the technology side or not. And I'm going to tell you, those that are going to advance with the technology, particularly AI, particularly things that are going to expand understanding consciousness, it is going to be exactly what that author who wrote Sapiens was talking about in the difference of Sapiens and Neanderthals. It is going to be that ludicrous difference. And I guarantee you the extinction of Sapiens who do not evolve with the technology. I can guarantee it, because the level of consciousness and ability is going to expand so exponentially for those who have the technology that it's going to be like they're not going to be understanding each other anymore.
And listen, like, I'm not talking about 2024. Like, I'm talking about 2035. Like I'm talking about the way that cell phones are ubiquitous now. What I'm saying is the toothpaste is out the tube. Like, the technology is now here. Think, we're on YouTube. The early adopters of YouTube before Google even bought them was probably some rich white dudes that wanted to be filmmakers like Casey Neistat, who didn't have that platform. But now kids are like leading in YouTube and TikTok as far as like playing with slime. Like, what I'm saying is that, you know, Apple's job is going to be to like air traffic control. Like, hey, this is not up to our standard, or you can't have that, like kind of what they do at the App Store. But the 4 of us can make an app right now and upload it in the same way we do with this podcast. I mean, the conversation changed to one more of a philosophical one and kind of playing around with what the future is, but I think that that's fine. I'm just saying, like, what does us dreaming look like? Because here's the reality for me. I don't want Apple to be the people that's building the apps that's supposed to, you know, go into my blackness. I just don't want it. It's going to be sanitized. That's just like the state doing it. I want, you know who should be doing it? What if the NAACP started gathering the best minds now and started to archive these thoughts and these theories? And like, this is the NAACP's official like curriculum for K-12. What if you could do something in this verse? Because it's this technology and AI, like you said, Omar, which is growing every single day. Since we've done it, AI makes strides every day. But what if like what if Jubilee's son has a kid when he's an adult and married, and he can take a test? That kid takes a test. You are in the 7th grade, you're reading at a 4th grade math level. Because we know what you like, here's the plan we're going to put you on. Like, you like Spider-Man, here's a 4th grade reading level Spider-Man book. And to get to the 5th one, they're going to gamify it. To get to the 5th one, you got to be proficient here, right? You got to do this. Like we can basically democratize education in a way that I don't think we've been able to do anymore. But all that stuff comes to choice, because you can watch educational videos on YouTube and you can watch bullshit on YouTube, right? Like, all that's going to exist. But what I don't want to put the fate in a corporation. I forget them. Like, the technology is open. It's going to be open. It's about to be open in 10 years, right? It's like, what are we going to create? Who are we building to create this stuff? You know what I'm saying? That's the positive part of it. But yes, absolutely. Every danger you got to worry about with phones is going to be heightened. All the over sexualization is going to be heightened. All the bullying and cyber stuff. I think we talk about how we're going to socialize kids. How we going to socialize kids now? Kids don't know how to talk to people in reality right now. You know what I'm saying? So I just think that a lot of the problems that we brought up are problems that have been here. But, you know, I think this could democratize education for a lot of poor people later on in life. But it's going to take a while. And, but I think it's going to play out. Damn, what time is it? It's 5. It's well, thank y'all for envisioning I need to go on the tech show and talk about it. But I think I think it's good though. I think it's good to have these conversations outside of tech spaces.
So nerdy about this.
Yeah, and this is what I think that the screen is split up perfectly, right? I think me and Omar on the left side of the screen is like who's kind of in this world a little bit, kind of plays with tech, kind of. You know what I'm saying? We kind of been asking for some of these things, and I do think David and Jubilee from a very like grounded analog, like, yo, here's what we're dealing with now. And this issue, I see this issue of racism only getting exacerbated. I actually think it's
and we're parents with
parents,
you know, children of the age that are like getting really heavily involved in technology. So I think, at least for me, that's kind of where some of this is coming from.
Listen, man, remember, like I just watched the technology, dog, where I controlled the entire spatial computing device with my eyes and fingers. Like, do you understand? Like, it's
wild.
This is what it is a technological marvel. And again, I also know that you haven't had it on yet. Like, you haven't been in it yet. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because when it wasn't until I was in it, like I was excited before, but it wasn't until I was in it and I was in Avengers Tower and I looked to the right and it's Tony Stark's phone book. It's his phone with like pepper on it. Like, it's like, wait a second. And it looked so real. Like you will mess around in the theater and try to put something on the table in front of you. I played chess on my desk. I played chess on my table looking down at the pieces and then it played back. It's like, wait a second, what is happening right now? So there could be some crazy stuff.
A concrete example here. A concrete example would be like, you know, in my age, we grew up with textbooks that were like old, outdated, heavy. We hated them, right? And then at some point, we went, you know, there's still textbooks, but now you have like online interactive textbooks where kids, you know, are accessing their textbooks and content on their Chromebooks, and there's links you can click, and there's videos, and it's more interactive. So this new iteration is like fully immersive virtual reality, where you're still going to be learning about, you know, U.S. history or world history or whatever it is, but you're going to actually be in the setting, right? And if you're a young person, that's pretty exciting. And I think in general, if you looked at it from a scientific, psychological perspective, you know, like that's the best way probably to learn anything, right? By being embedded in it. So, I
mean, every day is a field trip. I mean, come on. And listen, right after this, I'll do a group group FaceTime to anybody that wants to see it with the four of us just now. That's not anybody. That's not y'all out there. It's just these people. I will do it. I'll do it for like 5 minutes because again, you have to somewhat be immersed in it. But I think, you know, I'm looking at this for poor schools like this, and I'm going into final thoughts. I'll go and just let y'all have it. Poor schools can't afford to go on a bunch of field trips. But when they get this technology and it's written off, we can go to Paris today. We can go to China tomorrow. We can go to China in 1850 tomorrow. We can go to Chicago right after the Chicago fire. We can go to Pompeii. Like it is like I can math. Think about a mathematician. Like I can go and look at what the pyramids looked like when they made it, when they were still glowing white from the limestone, right? Like because limestone starts out really bright white and does whatever. I'm just saying, I think the fears that y'all have is right. The things that we should be, I think you're absolutely right. I think as a tech enthusiast though, like, and I think some of this is our responsibility around what we build for it and how we manage it. And nothing is ever going to take the place of what a parent's role in this stuff should be. Like, so I think I think you should be able to always see what your kid is doing, which you can right now. Like you can have it mirrored to you and all that stuff. But my final thought, as I throw it to David, you next. My final thought is I'm very excited about it. I don't get excited about much, but I hear those issues that we got. My hope, though, is that we get some overzealous young people that maybe ain't even born yet, that's maybe 5 or 6 years old right now. I mean, they're going to be the ones that's like really dictating what you can do. And the stuff ain't even been pushed to its limit yet. So I'm excited for what can be there, but always fearful for what we as humans are going to do with anything, a la cell phones. David?
All right. I think I'm definitely hopeful too. And I can't wait to get my hands on the technology. I think I understand what you're saying in terms of like what it is and where it is in this moment. Like it's hardware, right? With software backing it up with operating system. But now the opportunity exists for the developer side, right? To create the content, to create the experiences. And I think that's where we can get into and lean into, that responsibility part of like Black developers, brown developers to get in and actually do that kind of like ground level work based on, our own experience, right? So I understand that, and I'm hopeful for that. I think the other thing, like with so many other pieces of technology, there needs to be a mindset shift. Not in education. I think people have generally like bought into like, okay, technology is going to be part of education going forward. But making sure that when school districts, I don't know if y'all remember when LAUSD about 15 years ago went out and bought iPads for everybody, and they all got lost and nobody really used them. We're talking about like, I mean, millions of dollars of public money.
I think it was $1 billion. Yeah.
It was okay. I didn't want to go that far, but I think you're right. Incredibly wasteful initiative. So when this new technology comes out, I hope school districts are mindful about, what they're buying. Do they have the capacity to train their teachers, right? I think teacher training around this stuff, getting teacher input, not just input, but buy-in. Otherwise, you're going to have very expensive technology sitting in a crate in the back of the classroom, right? While a teacher still teaches out of a textbook. So it's a whole process. Things in education, we know they take time. But ultimately, I hope, students that need it the most have access to some of this powerful technology. Yeah.
Jude and Omar, you take us home.
Today, my final thought is everything David said. Take it away, Omar. Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful. I am hopeful. My concerns don't necessarily outweigh my hope. I just, I'm a both and I just think I think that corporations do have a responsibility. I know you guys are like, oh, they're here to make a profit and blah blah blah, but it's like, at what point as a nation do we really, put our money where our mouth is? We say that we care about children and their future. These are in these little children that are in second grade now. We're going to blink, they're going to be 18. We're going to blink, they're going to be 21, 28. They're going to be in charge. How are we setting them up, for success in the future? And is there success in the future for them without them being able to access this kind of technology and utilize it? And who has access to this already? So yeah, it may have been done in secret, but does the military have access to this kind of technology? Right? Do politicians have access to this kind of technology? If so, then why don't our children have access, or why isn't there a plan for that to happen? That's where I am. I love to see when children are considered in the plans for our nation's future, our world's future. And so many times, I don't see that. And it's a sore spot for me. So there's that. Omar.
I believe the children are the future. Thank you. Teach them now. Let them lead the way. Extra chocolate. I got so much to say about this. One thing I will say in my final thoughts on the David and Jubilee side of this is I think it's really important to bear in mind, not that the technology exists, it's what is the content that these kids are looking at. So it's an inevitability that these kids are stuck to iPads and phones, and eventually this VR world or this virtual world, it is truly an inevitability. And it's not that I fight my niece being on the phone, because I do, or fight my niece being on an iPad or my goddaughter being on an iPad because I do. It's like, hey man, like there's something about having a conversation. There's something about writing. There are other things that need to be done that need to at least be grounded in two different realities: the technological reality and what is our perceived reality, if you will. But it's the content. So, you know, if my niece is talking to Nietzsche in a headset and I get to participate in that conversation, I'm like, shit, dude, all day. If Charles is talking about, we have low income kids, many of who've never left El Paso, never gotten on a plane before, and I get to take them to Teotihuacan and help explore the pyramids with them, or Chichen Itza, I'm like, holy crap, dude, all day long. It's things like social media
Absolutely.
and profiteers who are using these technological advances not to move society forward, but essentially to blanketly profit. I think that's where we need to be worried. And I think that's where I'm with David and Jubilee about parents need a lot of say. We need to be mindful about kids. We need to think about what these technologies are going to do for people, because I don't think it's as black and white as go outside and play anymore. This shit's going to be embedded into people's brains, bro. Like that's the next, dude, it's already happening with that link. Give
Neuralink,
it 5
yeah.
years, 10 years. I was saying 50 years. Doc, you're right. Speed that shit up. 5 years, 10 years. We're going to be seeing a completely new species of us ingrained with tech and AI. And I think it's really important that we think about the implications of the content and how we're using it in order to do things like expand consciousness. And I think that's the inner work. Technology and the biology of humans and the integration of those two is going to be an inevitability. And it's not just a tool. It may just be part of our entire landscape of how we perceive the world, right? Because if you're looking at these goggles and the world looks radically different in seeing these goggles, who knows what's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe technology gives us the aptitude to see x-rays or radio waves or other things of a supernatural or ethereal existence that we couldn't perceive with our own eyes, but with technological advances allows us to have a greater scope of existence, if you will. Being that as it may, I'm excited for those implications because I think that's going to lead to greater consciousness. I think it's going to lead to a new revolution. I am worried, as Jubilee says, that if we don't have solid intent about what it's for, how we're using it to make the world a better place, and just allowing profiteers to destroy children's mind vis-a-vis something like social media, like we've seen, we wind up destroying ourselves in a way that, you know, may lead Mark Zuckerberg to build weird ass multi-million condos in Hawaii. But does that guy know that we don't? I will say this, that on a high note, Doc, I would love the opportunity to talk with Carl Jung. I would love the opportunity to talk with Jesus. I would love the opportunity to talk to Shaka Zulu. Like, imagine, dude, imagine like being like, talking to Montezuma and being like, shit's about to go down, dude. And being like, what? But this was the prophecy. And I was being like, I would love.
I mean, analyzing Napoleon's war, like the way his battlefronts, like, I mean,
the opportunities for learning and paradigm shift and visitation is going to be extraordinary. And I'm with you because I talked about this when I read Ready Player One. I was like, I envisioned my kids in a school in a cool ass classroom having a brief discussion about visiting Chichen Itza, the Louvre, Patagonia, and then boom, they're there visiting it and interacting much like a video game, because I honestly think education should start looking a bit more like a video game to keep kids interested, interacted, developing real world skill sets, communicating, learning, ethics and responsibility, seeing the impact of their actions in real time through characters virtually versus what we hide in the masks of ourselves. I see a grand future, and I'm an optimist and see the possibilities, but I'm always on the side of that grand future must be done with the intent of real humans leading that future, because if we leave it up to everybody else, like, I don't know if we're going to get what we're going to get. So that's a very long final thought from me.
It's all good, man. I mean, that's David, that's Jube, that's O. I am Charles. We will see you all next week, same bad time, same bad station. Y'all take care of each other and yourselves. Peace out. And Jubilee stuff still doesn't work, by the way. None of her, we can do all of it.
You can do it.
She can't do it. It doesn't work. It doesn't matter. So it works on ours, all good. Y'all have a good one.